الله أكبر حي على الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Have praise to Allah and the highest honors to his prophet, Prophet Noble Jordan Lee. I'd also like to extend honors to our flag, the red flag with the green five-pointed star in the center, which reminds us of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and the standards that we're to uphold as Moorish Americans. I'd like to extend honors to our Sheikh staff, our Vanguard staff, peace. I'd like to extend honors to the members and the visitors of the Moorish Science Temple of America, because when man honors man, he honors his Father God Allah. Islam. Islam. I'm going to start off with a reading from our prophet, or the Circle 7, excuse me. Chapter 11. Jesus and Barada, together they read the sacred books. Verse 1, or instruction 1. Among the Buddhist priests was one who saw a lofty wisdom in the words that Jesus spoke. It was Barada Arabo. Together Jesus and Barada read the Jewish Psalms and the prophets, read the Vedas, the Avestas, and the wisdom of Gautama. And as they read, they talked about the possibilities of man. Write that on the board. And as they read, they talked about the possibilities of man. Barada said, "Man is the marvel of the universe. He is part of every part." I want us to remember that. He is a part of he is a part of everything, for he has been a living thing on every plane of life. Verse 5, time never was when man was not. And then he was a bit of formless substance in the molds of time. And then a protoplasm. By universal law, all things tend upward to a state of perfectness. The protoplasm evolved, becoming worm, then reptile, bird, and beast. And then at last it reached the form of man. Now man himself is mind, and mind is here to gain perfection by experience. And mind is often manifest in fleshly form, and in the form best suited to its growth. So mind may manifest as worm, or bird, or beast, or man. The time will come when everything of life will be evolved unto the state of perfect man. And after man is man in perfectness, he will evolve to higher forms of life. And Jesus said, Barada Arabo, who taught you this? That mind, which is the man, may manifest in flesh of beast, of bird, or creeping thing. Barada said, from times which man remembers not, our priests have told us so, and so we know. And Jesus said, enlighten Arabo, are you a mastermind and do not know that man knows not by being told? Man may believe what others say, but thus he never knows. If man would know, he must himself be what he knows. Do you remember, Arabo, when you were an ape, or bird, or worm? Now, if you have no better proving of your plea than that the priest have told you so, you don't know, you simply guess. Regard not, then, what any man has said. Let us forget the flesh, and go with mind into the land of fleshless things. Mind never does forget, and backwards through the ages, masterminds can trace themselves back, and thus they know. Time never was when man was not. And this is our prophet Jesus speaking and correcting Barada Arabo in his thought process. Verse 18, it says, time never was when man was not. That which begins will have an end. If man was not, then time will come when he will not exist. From Allah's own record book, we read, the triune Allah breathed forth and stood 7 spirits before his face. The Hebrews call these 7 spirits Elohim. And these are they who in their boundless power created everything that is or was. These spirits of the triune Allah moved on the face of the boundless space, and 7 ethers were, and every other had its form of life. These forms of life were but the thought of Allah, clothed in the substance of their ether planes. Men call these ether planes the planes of protoplasm, of earth, of plant, of beast, of man, of angel, and cherubim. These planes, with all their teeming thoughts of Allah, are never seen by eyes of man in flesh. They are composed of substance far too fine for fleshly eyes to see. And still they constitute the soul of things. And with the eyes of soul, all creatures see these ether planes and all forms of life. Because all forms of life on every plane are thoughts of Allah. All creatures think, and every creature is possessed of will, and in its measure has the power to choose. And in their native planes, all creatures are supplied with the nourishment from their ether planes. And so it was with every living thing until the will became a sluggish will. And then the ethers of protoplasm, the earth, the plant, the beast, the man began to vibrate slow. Began to vibrate slow. The ethers all became more dense, and all creatures of these planes were clothed with coarser garbs of flesh, which men can see. And thus this coarser manifest, which men call physical, appeared. And this is what is called the fall of man. But man fell not alone, for protoplasm and earth and plant and beast were all included in the fall. The angels and the cherubim fell not. Their wills were ever strong. And so they held the ethers of their planes in harmony with Allah. Now, when the ether reached the rate of atmosphere, all creatures of the planes must get their food from atmosphere, the conflict came. And that which finite man called survival of the best became law. The stronger ate the bodies of the weaker manifest. And here is where the carnal law of evolution had its rise. And now man, in his utter shamelessness, strikes down and eats the beast, and the beast consumes the plant, and the plant thrives on the earth, and the earth absorbs the protoplasm. And yonder kingdom of soul, this carnal evolution is not known. And the great work of masterminds is to restore the heritage of man, to bring him back to his estate that he has lost. When he again will live upon the ethers of his native plane. The thoughts of Allah change not. The manifests of life on every plane unfold into perfection of their kind. And as the thought of Allah can never die, there is no death to any being of the 7 ethers, of the 7 spirits of the triune Allah. And so an earth is never plant, a beast or a bird or a creeping thing is never man, and man is not and cannot be a beast or bird or creeping thing. The time will come when all these 7 manifests will be absorbed, and man and beast and plant and earth and protoplasm will be redeemed. Barada was amazed. The wisdom of the Jewish sage was a revelation unto him. Now Bidyapati, wisest of the Indian sages, chief of the temple Kapavistu, heard Bharata speak to Jesus of the origin of man, and heard the answers of the Hebrew prophet, and he said, "You priests of Kapavistu, hear me speak. We stand today upon the crest of time. 6 times ago, a master soul was born, who gave a glorious light to man, and now a master sage stands here in the temple Kapavistu. The Hebrew prophet is the rising star of wisdom, deified. He brings to us a knowledge of the secrets things of Allah, and all the world will hear his words, will heed his words, and glorify his name. You priests of the temple Kapavistu, stay, be still, and listen when he speaks. He is the living oracle of Allah." And all the priests gave thanks and praised the Buddha of enlightenment. And I read all of that to preface another article coming from the Kabbalion, to make sure that we're in line with our prophet and in line with the Moorish Science Temple of America and the foundation that our prophet laid down. And I'm going to read from a section, or from chapter 8 of the Kabbalion, and that deals with the Hermetic principle of correspondence. And keep in mind the language that our prophet used when he spoke to us about these different planes. And it says, the planes of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. The Kabbalion. The great second Hermetic principle embodies the truth that there is a harmony or agreement and correspondence between the several planes of manifestation, life, and being. Truth is truth because all that is included in the universe this truth is a truth because all that is included in the universe emanates from the same source. That goes back to all coming from Allah, or Allah being Amt, and our 101s. And the same laws, principles, and characteristics apply to each unit, or a combination of units, of activity, as each manifests its own phenomenon upon its own plane. That sounds very familiar to what we heard in our chapter 11 about each having their own attribute, each having their own attributes, the protoplasm, the beast, the man. It says, for the purpose of conveyance of thought and study, the Hermetic philosophy considers that the universe may be divided into 3 great planes or of phenomena, known as the three great planes, namely the great plane, the great physical plane, the great mental plane, or as we know, the plane of soul. So our physical plane is the plane of things made manifest. Our mental plane, or the great mental plane as defined here, is our plane of soul, and the great spiritual plane, which we have the plane of spirit in our circle 7. These divisions are more or less artificial and arbitrary, for the truth is that all of the 3 divisions are but ascending degrees of the great scale of life. So basically they are one. The lowest point of which is undifferentiated matter. So that's that plane of protoplasm. That's that matter, that lowest degree of life. And the highest point of that is spirit. And moreover, the different planes shade into each other, so that no hard and vast division may be made between the higher phenomenon of the physical and the lower of the mental, or of the soul, or between the higher of the mental and the lower of the physical. So our Grand Governor says all the time that there's no immediate change, as it says here in this book. It's kind of like how he gives the example of changing a radio station and you hear a little static from one station or you hear static from another station, but you're hearing both stations at the same time. So us as manifest and all other thinking things as manifest are comprised of all the attributes of Allah, because we are the thoughts of Allah made manifest. Islam. In short, the three great planes may be regarded as three great groups of degrees of life manifestation. While the purpose of this little book do not allow us to while the purposes of this little book do not allow us to enter into an extended discussion of or explanation of the subject of these different planes, still we think it well to give a general description of the same at this point. At the beginning, we may as well consider the question so often asked by the neophyte or the student or the person who comes to learn, who desires to be informed regarding the meaning of the word plane, which term has been very freely used and very poorly explained in many recent works upon the subject of occultism. The question is generally about as follows: is a plane a place having dimensions, or is it merely a condition or state? We answer no, not a place, nor ordinary dimension of space, and yet more than a state or condition. It may be considered as a state or condition, and yet the state or condition is a degree of dimension in a scale subject to measurement. Going further, it says, somewhat paradoxically, is it not? But let us examine that matter. A dimension, you know, is a measure in a straight line relating to a measure. I'll read that again. A dimension, you know, is a measure in a straight line relating to a measure, etc. So what do we know about, or what teaching do we have about a line in our circle 7? I'm sorry, that's not a straight line. Don't critique me. What degree do we have about the line in our circle 7?
Islam, yeah, plumb.
Islam, the plumb line. And what does this line do? What does this line represent?
It gives measurements from height to depth.
Islam. And more so relating to our circle 7, or what it says in our circle 7, it said, or this cord, I should say, rather, this cord unites the planes of spirit, soul, and the physical, as it's described in this book, are manifest.
Islam.
So I asked us, and we don't have to answer out loud, where do we think we are, or where do we feel like we are on this plane, or on this line? Are we close to Allah? Do we feel close to Allah? Because it says that, I'll read this part again. The question asked by the neophytes is a plane a place having dimensions, or is it merely a condition or state? We answer no, not a place, nor ordinary dimension of space, and yet more than a state or condition. It may be considered a state or condition, and yet that the state or condition is a degree of a dimension in a scale subject to measurement. So what is that measurement? What do we measure ourselves up to? We should measure ourselves up to our prophet. We should measure ourselves up to all of our prophets. Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Confucius, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, and all of the other great prophets that came to us. That's the measuring scale. And we have to see how close we are to Allah. The ordinary dimensions of space are length, breadth, height, and perhaps length, breadth, height, thickness, and circumference. But there is another dimension of created things, or measure in a straight line. Known to occultists and to scientists as well, although the latter have not as yet applied the term dimension to it. And this new dimension, which by the way is much speculated about, fourth dimension, is the standard used in determining the degrees or planes. Islam. And then I'll cover more about this, inshallah, next week, because it goes into another 7 planes. The 7 minor physical planes are as follows. So we have the same Hermetic teachings in our Circle 7 that was brought to us to this earth by Hermes. Our Prophet Noble Drew Ali brought that to us here in the Americas. But I do want to go into a reading, go back to reading what part himself, but I want to read again what our brother Akil read, the chapter that our brother Akil read. Islam. And it's chapter 36, the holy instructions from the prophet, know thyself. Weak and ignorant as thou art, O man, humble as thou oughtest to be, O child of dust. That's that, Allah created us from the dust of the ground, as it speaks about in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. Wouldest thou raise thy thoughts to infinite wisdom? Wouldest thou see omnipotence displayed before thee? Contemplate thy frame. Fearfully and wonderfully art thou made.
Islam.
Praise therefore thy Creator with awe, and rejoice before him with reverence. Wherefore of all creatures art thou only erect, but that thou shouldest behold his works. Wherefore art thou to behold, but that thou mayest admire them. Wherefore to admire, but that thou mayest adore there in thy Creator. Wherefore is consciousness reposed on thee alone? And whence is it derived to thee? So when were we given this consciousness? When were we given this soul? When were we given this ability to think and to reason and to will? It says, it is not in flesh to think. It is not in bones to reason. The lion knoweth not that worms shall eat him. The ox perceiveth not that he is fed for slaughter. Something is added unto thee. I'm going to go back to verse 5 because that's significant as well. Us in our fallen state, we become, although like our brother Jesus said, we can't be those beasts, but we can become those beasts if somebody tells us we are those beasts, or we can behave like beasts, but we are never truly beasts. And in a way, we're, as Asiatics in America with no knowledge of ourselves, we are fed for slaughter. We're raised up and bred and conditioned to go out and serve someone else without being servants to our homes, without being servants to ourselves as a nation. So that ability to reason, although it hasn't been stripped from us, it hasn't been nurtured in us. That's that seed that has to be watered, and it can only be watered with purity and love. Islam. Something is added to thee. And this is that thing that hasn't been watered in us, that seed of Allah. Something is added to thee, unlike to what thou seest. Something informs the clay. Higher than all is the object of thy senses. Behold, what is it? The body remaineth perfect after it is fled. So it can't be our body that makes us the lords of this plane. Is something else added to us, because after we veil our form, what we call death, our body still remains perfect for a time until the worm is fixed on it, but our body still remains perfect. So what is it that is added to thee? The body remaineth perfect after it is fled, therefore it is no part of it. It is immaterial, therefore it is eternal. It is free to act, therefore it is accountable for its actions. And that's a key one as well. we have the ability to think for ourselves. We have the ability to reason. We have the ability to open our books and study our prophets and read these things, but we have to be disciplined enough to think as a collective and act as a collective. We can think as an individual and bring our individual thoughts together and act as a collective. And that's an ability of a wise man or a wise woman. Knoweth the ass the use of the food, because his teeth mow down the herbage, or standeth the crocodile erect, although his backbone is as straight as thine. Allah formed thee as he formed these. After them all wert thou created. Superiority and command were given thee over all, and of his own breath did he communicate the principle of knowledge. Islam. And when he communicated his breath, or he communicated that in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7 again. It says that first we were formed of the dust of the ground, and man breathed forth in the nostrils of man, and man became a living soul. What does that mean to us? Know thyself and the pride of his creation. I'll read that again. Know thyself and the pride of his creation. The line uniting divinity, the spirit, or Allah, and matter, or the manifest. Behold, a part of Allah himself is within thee. Behold, a part of Allah himself within thee. Remember thine own dignity, and nor dare descend to evil or meanness. So, as I mentioned last week, when we do a thing to others, or when we do a thing to ourselves, we do that particular thing to Allah. So if we think that it's okay to not care for ourselves, or it's okay to neglect ourselves and care for everybody else, that's not okay. Because we have to take care of that Allah within us. Islam. Who planted terror in the tail of the serpent, who clothed the neck of the horse with thunder, even he who instructed thee to crush the one under thy feet, and to tame the other to thy purpose. Islam. And I will read, I'm actually going to read one more portion from here, and then I'm going to yield the floor to our brother chairman. Islam. I want us to go back to this statement, the possibilities of man, and understand, like our prophet Jesus says, man knows not by being told, and that we have to go back, we have to trace ourselves back, and pardon myself for the paraphrase, but basically see things with the eyes of the eyes of our soul, or the eyes of our spirit, and not the eyes of the things made manifest. And so a lot of times we say that we're not perfect, but what does our circle 7 say? It says, now seed are perfect, yea, is perfect as the source from which they come, but they are not unfolded into life made manifest. I'll read that again. Now seed are perfect, yea, is perfect as the source from which they come, but they are not unfolded into the life made manifest. And I'll read it one more time. It says, now seed are perfect, yea, is perfect from the source from which they come, but they are not unfolded into life made manifest. The child is as perfect as the mother is. So man, the seed, must be deep planted in the soil, that he might grow, unfold, as does the bud unfold to show the flower. So this is saying that we're perfect. We're already perfect. It's not saying that if you do this, then you will be perfect. Or if you get this or possess this, then you'll be perfect. It's saying that seed, you are perfect. We are perfect. We have everything that we need already within us to unfold and develop. So why are we in this state? Why are we in the state that we're in now? Why do we even have conflict? Why are we struggling with certain things in our life? if we understand that we're perfect, if we understand the teaching that our prophet brought us. And I'll read that first portion, or I'll read the entire thing one more time. It says, "Now seed are perfect, yea, as perfect as the source from which they come, but they are not unfolded until life made manifest. The child is as perfect as the mother is. So man, the seed, must be deep planted in a soil that he might grow, unfold, as does the bud unfold to show the flower." Islam. And so I want us to think about this and think about what that means to be deeply planted in that soil. That means to be deeply, from my understanding, it means to be deeply rooted, deeply planted, deeply rooted in your culture, deeply rooted in your principles, deeply rooted in your teachings, deeply rooted in the instructions that our prophet brought us. And in order to do that, we have to hear these messages. We have to remember Allah. And with that, I will yield the floor to our brother chairman. I'll leave you all as I came in peace. Yes.
Allahu Akbar. Hayya ala salah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Hayya ala salah.